and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I. Unfortunately, I didn't hit the record button soon enough for you to catch the conversation about Austin Matthews going to Arizona, and we'll just leave it at that. That's Justin. How convinced are you that that's going to happen?
How convinced am I? Let's just say it's going to take a few more Christmas miracles. Yeah. He's not leaving Toronto. I honestly am not. I'm not worried even a little bit. Not worried even a little bit. If they go in and they can't win a playoff series by the end of his contract, then I'm gonna go ahead and just say I'm like, this team's done anyways. So, but I don't think that's gonna happen. Like, obviously, if you go 7 years without winning a playoff round with the team that they have, then what do you do? Like, it'd be unexplainable, right? Like, getting that many cracks at a playoff run with this team, it would be an absolute joke. It's not going to happen, so I'll just leave it at that. On today's show, we are going to dive into the Western Conference as promised. We were going to do the whole league, all the playoff races, and then I think we talked for like an hour and 20 minutes about the Eastern Conference. So we're going to dive into the West. And Justin, I'll give you dealer's choice here. What race should we focus in on here to start? Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, my favorite team to watch in the West for most of the season has been the Seattle Kraken, just where they started, and now it seems like they've been slipping a little bit. So now they're battling for that wild card spot, and I'd love to let's start off there.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think if we're honing in on the Pacific, that third spot in the Pacific, along with the wild card, is all wide open, right? Like, you've got Edmonton, Seattle, and Calgary really battling it out for two or three spots. I suppose all three could make the playoffs. Edmonton right now has played 3 more games than Colorado, and Colorado has 1 fewer point. So you got to think in these next 3 games, Colorado's going to pick up at least 2 points in those games. So Edmonton's definitely working really from a deficit, even though they're ahead. But Colorado has not been the Colorado that we got used to last year, mostly due to injuries. But that's really turned the Western Conference into a crazy race, because you think about those points that Colorado has lost because of playing so poorly. I mean, practically playing just over 500 hockey. I mean, this has really thrown a wrench in the West. It's why other teams are so high in the standings, because those games where we would have normally penciled in a Colorado win has gone the other way. And, there's an extra, let's say, at this point, 35 games in, we're really expecting the Avs to probably have more like a record that Vegas or Dallas has, that like 23 to 25 wins. And if that's the case, that's 12 points to the Avs credit and 12 points away from some other teams. What do you think about the Edmonton Oilers? I know you said you love watching Seattle, but part of me feels like the Pacific Division is sort of all bending on the Edmonton Oilers, because for one reason, everyone wants to see Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in the playoffs. What a disaster it would be if they didn't make the playoffs like this year. And it looked like they were going to be on top of the world to start the year, and here we are. They've gone 500 in their last 10, and now we're sitting at basically outside the playoffs, unless Colorado somehow goes on a bad losing streak. But the Edmonton Oilers, where do you stand on them right now?
Oh, I am not too keen on this Oilers team. I mean, look, when you look beyond the obvious, McDavid, Draisaitl, I mean, just offensive juggernauts they are, I'm a little worried about what they can produce, depth-wise, right? I mean, we know what Zach Hyman and
it's
Ryan
literally been their issue for like 7 years.
It has, and it still continues to haunt them, right? That's still the problem. I mean, look, Tyson Barrie's been nice on the back end, but he's still sometimes a defensive liability, and I think you come to expect that with a guy like that. Darnell Nurse, to me, has not lived up to his contract. I mean, this is a guy who, I expected to produce a little bit more, and he's been fine playing almost 24 minutes a night, but at $9.5 million, I kind of expected more of I don't know if you want to call it a Victor Hedman Roman Josi type impact, but it just hasn't even been close. And then beyond that, right, obviously they're clearly missing Evander Kane there. Whenever he gets back from injury here, I believe he's been skating. So, but who knows when he's coming back, and I don't have an idea on his timeline. But listen, I mean, Puljujarvi, Yamamoto, those depth pieces that they're expecting to contribute offensively have just not come close to anything. And I suspect, as we get closer and closer to this deadline, I think this is going to be an Edmonton team that's going to have to make some moves. I mean, yeah. I say have to because, look, you can't, like you said, you can't have a playoff series in the West without Connor McDavid and Draisaitl. If they miss again, I don't know how long you can be so pedestrian, and we're only 3 more seasons after this away from the end of McDavid's current deal, and it's like, okay, well, is he actually going to consider requesting a trade at any point, or saying, hey, you know what, we've got to do something bigger, we've got to do something better, because they've got Hyman, they've got Nugent Hopkins locked up on pretty reasonable deals for quite a few years after this. So you think they could figure out a way to get 1 or 2 other offensive players in there, but it doesn't really look like it.
Yeah, it's, for all the talk that we have thrown out to the, like, oh, they just can't find that depth scoring, right? Like, that's been a pretty consistent conversation point since Connor McDavid got there. And you look at it and you go, I mean, between McDavid and Draisaitl, they're making less than Matthews and Marner. And I would say that Matthews and Marner are the lesser pieces. Like, I would take McDavid and Draisaitl from a skill point. I would take those 2 guys over Matthews and Marner. It's slight. They're obviously, all 4 of them are quite different players, but I mean, you've got Connor McDavid at number 1, and then probably the rest of those guys are, at least Matthews, Draisaitl, you could make the argument of, like, there's number 2A and 2B. As far as the next best players in the league, I think that's a reasonable conversation to have. Marner's definitely not on the same level as far as scoring goals, so he's probably somewhere in the top 15 players in the NHL. But definitely in terms of wingers, he's got to be a top 10, top 5 winger because of what he can do on the penalty kill too. But you look at that and you go, okay, they're making less. A lot, and they don't have a John Tavares on their right. books, and so, like, what's going on? Why is it that this team has not been able to find depth? And it comes down to the fact that they never drafted. I mean, they also have Ryan Nugent Hopkins, who, by the way, is putting up more than a point per game right now. He's on the best clip of his entire career, 18 goals in 38 games. He's by the way, his career high in goals is 28. And right now he's on pace for almost 40 goals. So we'll see if he can hold that up. He would also shatter his career high in points, which was the same year in 18-19 where he had 69 points. He's on pace for about 93 points. So a great year for Nugent Hopkins. I mean, you look at that and you go, why is this happening to this team again, where they just can't seem to find their footing and win games? And to me, a lot of it is just they're kind of like the New Jersey Devils were last year. Like, they just cannot keep the puck out of their net. They're letting in, not just in terms of, you look at pure goals against, and they aren't doing so bad. They're not bad, especially they played more games than everyone in the West. And there's only, out of the teams that they're fighting with, most teams are right around where they are in terms of goals against. But, I mean, it's just been like not getting any timely goaltending. And that's really killed the Oilers, along with, of course, the fact that they just haven't had any stability on the back end. Just can't seem to make that work. And, yeah, Darnell Nurse has seemingly taken a step backwards, which is unfortunate. But I also don't think that this is forever. But you do wonder, they fire their coach, things turn around for a while, and does this, maybe there's something with this team, just they need new voices more often than not. I don't know, because it just seems like they can't figure themselves out. and they're playing in a division where literally every point is going to count. And does it seem like they sometimes just take their foot off the gas, like the rest of the team? I mean, not McDavid or Draisaitl, but they're taking their foot off the gas, or is it the fact that because Draisaitl and McDavid are so good and they can put up such big numbers that maybe the focus is too much on the numbers that they have? And you not to keep beating the Leaf drum, but you look at what the Leafs have done with their forwards and gone, we're going to have a greater devotion to defense. And you see this with a lot of really great teams that go on to win the Stanley Cup. We saw this with, as far back as I can think, you see it with like the Dallas Stars in 1999. You had Brett Hull, who was the ultimate screw defense player. I mean, this guy he scored 86 goals and he was a negative in plus minus. Like, literally a detriment to his team, and he scored 86 goals. He goes there and is a much better defensive player. You see teams throughout where, Tampa Bay, I would say, they devoted themselves more to the defensive side of the game. And once they stopped, you've got Kucherov putting up massive numbers and Stamkos scoring 60 goals. Once they stopped worrying about their own point totals and started playing this incredible team game, I think out of any team that we've seen over the last maybe 10, 15 years, I think that Tampa Bay plays probably the best overall team game, the most bought-in team that I can remember up to this point. But
yep.
I look at that and I go, I think that the Oilers are in this place where, yeah, they can put up huge numbers, but what the hell do the numbers matter? It doesn't matter anymore. Yes, then though, they have won a playoff series. There's the difference. They've won a playoff series. They've shown they can do it. The Leafs haven't. But man, the teams that Edmonton has lost to in the playoffs are laughably inferior to what they should have been. I mean, they lost to that freaking Colorado Avalanche team in the bubble, or Chicago Blackhawks team in the bubble that was just putrid.
Yeah, I mean, so the one difference I will say when you look at some of those other teams, right? When I look at, for example, the last two Cup-winning Tampa Bay Lightning teams, or even Washington, right? You talk about another team that kind of bought into defense when Trotz came in and Obi wasn't scoring, 100 goals a year, and started focusing a little bit more on playing a defensive game. And same with Backstrom there.
They went the pendulum swing with Adam Oates, and then they were like, well, you don't have to play that much defense, just a little.
Exactly. Right. You just have to play a little bit, right? But again, those teams had third lines that could come in and produce and chip in every once in a while, and fourth lines that knew how to grind out. And that's what I'm missing out of this Edmonton team, right? Is just those abilities to get those third and fourth lines that can contribute when, McDavid and Draisaitl aren't ripping it up, because, yeah, they're scoring a ton of goals. But, I mean, look, McDavid's got 32, Draisaitl 21, like you mentioned, Nugent Hopkins with 18 and Hyman 17. So, and then it drops right off to 6 after that with Darnell Nurse. So, I mean, obviously the scoring dips after those top four guys, and there's a clear reason why, because those guys are going to go ahead and play 25 minutes a night. But I mean, that to me is what is going to make the difference. And when you look at a team like Toronto, what you mentioned, they're starting to play a little bit more team defense, right? They still have some guys like Carly Yarncroc and David Kampf, who I know I could rely, that could contribute on those bottom six lines to come in and chip in every once in a while if Matthews or Marner are just sort of, having a little bit of a dry spell. Those guys will contribute, whereas I have no faith in anybody in the bottom six of this Oilers team to contribute. Yeah,
when you look at the bottom six and you go, McLeod, Fogle, Yamamoto, James Hamblin, Dylan Holloway, Derek Ryan. That is their bottom six. I mean, they're just they're also hurting, at the Vander Kane out. But every team is going to have injuries. Every team's got to be able to sustain some level of injury to each group. There isn't a team in the league that hasn't had major injuries either on the front end or the back end. Even the best teams like Boston was without Charlie McAvoy and Brad Marchand.
Right.
that would basically be like the Oilers being without Leon Draisaitl and Darnell Nurse. And imagine where this team would be if that was the case. So you got to look at it and go, there's something systemically wrong with the Edmonton Oilers. They're in this position often, and you look at the talent up front and you go, this team should not be even in this conversation of missing the playoffs. But here we are once again in the conversation about, holy crap, are the Edmonton Oilers going to miss the playoffs? Now, that could all change in 3 weeks. You go rattle off 8 in a row and suddenly you're in second place in the division. Okay. But the way that they have been playing, especially as of late, is seemingly with no urgency, and they are just getting no goaltending. It's rough
that always
times.
hurts, right?
It just feels like we had the same conversation last year. We were talking about, the Oilers are going to make the playoffs, and you can't, Ken Holland comes out, well, we're not spending a first round pick on this team if they can't make the playoffs. Well, guess what? Here we are again. Like, this is craziness. Go spend your first round pick. They're going to have to, and they're going to have to probably clear a little bit of space. And I mean, even with Evander Kane coming back, I don't think that that's enough to catapult this team to really being a Stanley Cup contender because of their lack of defensive depth. And I mean, hopefully Campbell can turn it around, or either that or Stuart Skinner is, ready to take the mantle. He's been good. He has been good. It's just everything's not lining up when it should. So for the Oilers, you look at that playoff race and you really wonder, because now I guess the one team that you would go, you said you love to watch them, and I do too. They've been very entertaining, the Seattle Kraken, mostly because, their fans are great and they don't have a superstar. They really remind me of that Vegas team their first year, where you're like, ooh, this is exciting, cool. Like, this team with no superstar player at this point. Matty Beniers, I think, will become a superstar in this league, but I think you look at them and you go, they're fun to watch because they just work and they're bought in, and they're not supposed to be here. But right. Maybe they're the one team that you go, well, based on Edmonton and Colorado behind them, do they fall off? But yeah, it's that's what's going to have to happen. Either Edmonton or Colorado are going to miss the playoffs. Like, at this point, what do you think the odds are that both those teams, or one of those teams, misses the playoffs?
I would probably go a solid 33% here, and my money would be on Edmonton missing the playoffs at this point. Right, as poorly as Jack Campbell's been playing, and again, it could mean Stuart Skinner's going to probably get 75 to 80% of the games down the stretch. Which, if that's the case, that's probably Edmonton's best hope right now. But Colorado's going to get healthy at some point. They're going to make a move because they need to figure out this second line center spot, I think, or at least bring in some more depth scoring. And so, I think as good as Colorado's goaltending's been, I can't see them missing the playoffs with the type of talent they have too. Same as Edmonton, but where the difference is I know Colorado's been there. They know what it takes to grind out and win, and they've got that goaltending that I can trust in a little bit more. So. So if I had to pick, one of these guys missing, I would probably go with Edmonton at a 33% chance. Yeah,
the only team even in a playoff race that does not have a winning record at home. They are 9-10-1 at home. So that's killed them. I mean, when you look at everyone else is at least above 500 by a game or two, and they just can't do it at home, and that's really killed them. Now. They get Evander Kane back. They go out and they make a move. They certainly can hold their own and move up the standings. But they have played more games than other people. Seattle wins 2 of these 3, and suddenly there's a 4-point spread. And Colorado wins 2 of their 3, and they're 3 points back of Colorado. It can get away from them really quick if they can't rattle off some wins here. And man, you got to look at this and go, how is it that we're not calling for Ken Holland when this just shouldn't be happening? This is not I get it. They won a playoff series last year. I get it. They turned the ship around last year, but you know what? He was the one who who brought it. I can't even think. I can think of his face. Dave Tippett, their head coach before. He's the one who brought him in, and Dave Tippett could never do it. Hires Jay Woodcroft, and of course he has a great end of the season, wins that playoff round. But here we are again, and you gotta go. Was it the coaching, or is it just this guy is building a team in 2003? Like, it doesn't maybe have it anymore. I mean, in reality, since that cup win in, what was it, 2008, right? The Wings won the cup 2008.
Yep.
What has he done? They went to the Stanley Cup Finals the following year, and then since then, I don't think they made it out of the second round, right?
No.
None of his teams have. So that's, by my count, 14 seasons, including this one. So 13 seasons where his team has, I believe, won, two, maybe three playoff series?
Well, and here's the thing. I mean, he's come from a system that's traditionally, been patient, been okay with waiting on guys to develop and bring up talent that way. But he comes into an Edmonton team where he didn't have a huge farm system. He doesn't have a lot of, capital as far as, players to be able to be patient on. And so when you don't have this, you have to be aggressive in other ways to find ways to succeed. And I think, I think as a fan base, and I would assume as ownership, and I don't know, what, really how ownership feels, but just off the top of my head, I would assume that when you have McDavid and Draisaitl in these amazing deals here for 2 more seasons after this one, you have to be aggressive and you have to go all in, because these guys, McDavid's easily going to sign for $15 million plus.
Easy.
And Draisaitl, I would assume, is going to be pretty close to that number as well. And then when you, and again, not knowing where the cap is, but knowing that it's going up, who knows how much, money they'll really have to spend on depth players then too. And so you might still be in the same kind of predicament, or you might even be worse off, and you might lose one of these players. So if there's a time for Ken Holland to say, we're going all in, we're spending those first round picks, they have to do it now. I do not think they have time to sit around and wait 2 or 3 years and let some of these first rounders develop so they can have these quote unquote depth players, kind of like how Chicago did it, where they got lucky and they would have these younger kids come up and they could plug them in on the third line and get some scoring, but they don't have that kind of time.
Yeah, and the time is now, because they did that, right? They drafted, they waited, and they drafted poorly because Puljujarvi has not turned into the player that they wanted. Yamamoto has not turned into the player that they wanted. I mean, we could go back into time a little bit and talk about some other players that they took in the first overall spot and that did not work out. So they have missed on players, and that's just, when all is said and done, that's probably their Achilles heel has been their drafting. And really, Ken Holland, I mean, I would love to go back and look at all the players that Ken Holland has drafted since winning the Stanley Cup in 2008, and I guess I would guess that there are not too many great players that were drafted after that point, and we're going to do it right now, because why not?
Well, I mean, so I can tell you a few off the top of my head. I mean, like, look,
drafted Thomas Tatar.
Yep.
In 2009.
I mean, he's been okay. He's a good middle six guy, but again, he's not. He's not a world beater. He's not a big needle mover, right?
Calle Järnkrok, 2010 with the second round pick.
Yep. But
let's
again,
just take a look at
six guy.
Let's take a look at his first round picks. Riley Sheehan with the 21st overall pick. Did not end up being the greatest player, but he's okay.
I guess, whole year without scoring.
I guess I'll give it to him in 2013. He took Mantha in the first round and Bertuzzi in the second round. That's a great year. And then after 2013, Dylan Larkin with the 15th overall pick in 2014. That's a solid pick.
That was a no-brainer because this kid's out of Michigan.
Right.
I mean, They knew they were going to draft him regardless.
Philip Roenick in 2016. He took him. That's
been an okay pick.
Yeah, I mean, he's fine. I'm just kind of looking for guys who are actually on an NHL roster that make any difference at all. I mean, you got Joe Veleno, who hasn't panned out. Philip Zadina, who has been okay. Broberg in 2019 for the Oilers, and Dylan Holloway's on their fourth line. And that's looking at who he's drafted as an Edmonton Oilers general manager. You've got Philip Broberg, his 8th overall pick, and that's an 8th overall pick, mind you, that is, yes, in their lineup, but I mean, he's
not moving the needle.
Yeah, I mean, and half the time he's not even starting. He's not even playing. He's been a healthy scratch.
And you look at some of the guys after him. I mean,
Trevor Zegras.
Yeah, first pick right after him. Trevor Zegras.
Matthew Boldy, Spencer Knight. Boy, wouldn't you like to have Spencer Knight right now?
Cole Caulfield.
Yeah.
Even Alex Newhook in the Avs organization right now. I would take
Ryan
him.
Suzuki. Yeah, there's some Shane Pinto in the second round. I mean, it's hard to say at that point.
Yeah, Peter Kochenkov in Carolina. There's another goaltender. I mean, I think he would love to have right now.
So certainly, I mean, yeah, you look at, and then I'm gonna hold off 2022 because that's not necessarily fair, and 2021 because Xavier Bourriot hasn't had a chance yet. But I mean, you look back and you just go, man, it seems like they wasted. I mean, a 14th overall, 8th overall in 2 consecutive years, and neither of those players have made a huge impact, and that's going to hurt you. I guess that's 2019 is as far back as we can really judge him as a GM from a drafting standpoint, because that's obviously when he took over. But yeah, it's just, man, we keep beating this drum on the Edmonton Oilers, but I do wonder, he's now been the GM for 4 years, and how much longer of this, I'll say, mediocrity are you willing to accept with the 2 best players in the game? I mean, this is as Pittsburgh Penguins 2008 as it gets. You've got Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby part 2. And probably both players are even better than those guys were, at least from a talent standpoint. It's just a matter of, can you get a coach that can get this team to win, and a GM that can fill the coffers enough to help them to get there. Okay, well, let's stop hating on the Edmonton Oilers and hope they can make the playoffs. Colorado, you think that where are you at with? I mean, they've got tons of injuries, but the last team to miss the playoffs after winning the Stanley Cup was the 2005-2006 Carolina Hurricanes. Are we going to see a repeat of that?
I don't think so. I mean, I think, there have been a ton of injuries, and I think at some point, right, this team's going to get healthy. We're going to see Landeskog back. I don't know what his timeline's looking like, but he's going to come back, and I think that's going to elevate this team to a whole nother level. And
McKinnon has been activated from injured reserve.
Right. And I do think, too, at some point, I don't think, again, money aside, they have $6+ million right now when you talk about deadline cap space. And so I think at some point Joe Sakic is not going to wait around to get close to the deadline to quote unquote save a couple bucks, right?
Well, I think they were hoping that they could bank that money until the trade deadline, because then they have it a little bit more. And now you're sitting in a position where they're going to have to bring back Landeskog though, and then suddenly your cap space is gone.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The cap space, disappears a little bit, but I think, again, you look at some trade assets they have. They have Samuel Girard. They can easily move him. They could find a team to maybe take on Eric Johnson's contract, maybe a couple $1 million, on that one. And so I think there are creative ways they can create some cap space, but they have assets to move. And I think, they've got enough capital. I think once you get, again, guys coming back healthy, I think this team is smart enough. They're good enough, and I think they've got enough talent to get in. But without filling that second line center spot, I don't know if they have enough talent to go far in the playoffs. I just don't think it's a question of if they'll get in. It's just a matter of how long they'll stay in.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't think that Eric Johnson is going to get traded. I mean, he has I guess he has like a limited no move. It's not too restrictive. 19 teams he can be traded to. I don't know that you're looking at him and going, yeah, it's worth just hanging on to $3 million or something. Or I think they'll just keep him. He was pretty valuable in the playoffs. He's a UFA at the end of the year. You probably bring him back on like a 1x1, just because they do really like him. He's been there for a long time, and I think he brings a lot of stability to the back end, where it's probably more of an intangible than anything. It's an expensive intangible. But they do have, they've got Bowen Byram on his ELC right now. You've got Curtis McDermott making less than $1 million. Brad Hunt making less than, they've got guys who are filling in right now who are inexpensive, and I think you're probably leaving your defense alone, knowing you're getting Josh Manson and Bowen Byram back, and that is going to, they'll go into the playoffs, Makar and Johnson and Gerard, Taves, Josh Manson, and then probably McDermott or whoever else you want to fill in there as your sixth defenseman. And it's as easy to go out and scoop up a sixth defenseman at the deadline as ever by spending a fourth round pick or something. So I just think that, obviously their weak point is, once again, and we're seeing this across the league because the salary cap hasn't gone up in forever. We're seeing the lack of depth. It's the case for almost every really good team. That there's a lack of depth. You look at the Dallas Stars. There's a little bit of lack of depth once you get beyond their top six. Vegas. There's a little lack of depth once you get beyond their top six. Even like Boston is maybe one of the exceptions in Carolina. No, Carolina just they're the same. There's so many teams that don't have depth because of the lack of cap. Because teams have had to let that one player go or those two players go, and that wrecks you after a while. Theoretically, it's supposed to feed the lesser teams and give them some better players, but you kind of see the same teams towards the top. I think when it comes to the Avalanche, that this is also that, like, all right, we won the Stanley Cup, we know how to do this. Maybe the beginning of the year there was a little bit of a hangover. I feel like they're just too good, and Georgiev has struggled as of a little late, but he's been fine. Francouz has been fine. They're getting decent goaltending, and I think they'll right this ship. I think they're definitely more likely than the Edmonton Oilers to right their ship because they currently are without a lot of players that they're about to get back. They're without four mainstays on their team with Byram, Manson, Landeskog, McKinnon, and even Darren Helm to an extent is somebody who played a big role for them in the playoffs. Scored a big goal.
Yep.
Okay, should we well, we haven't really talked about Calgary at all. Are like, out of those four teams, I guess this is where we'll close this portion of it. Calgary sits third in the Pacific. You've got Seattle and Edmonton in the first two wildcard spots. Colorado a point out on Edmonton with 3 games in hand. Where do you feel like these teams ultimately fall when the chips are all played out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think,
and obviously
honestly,
Colorado can't finish third in the Pacific. They're
right.
I should say they're 3 points back of the Wild, who are third in the Central.
Personally, I think the Pacific Division, you're going to see Vegas, LA, and Calgary nab those top 3 spots. I think LA starting to get some really good goaltending out of Phoenix Copley. They're starting to figure it out as a team, and they're scoring enough goals that I think eventually they're going to right that goal differential where I think they'll come out pretty close to even, and they'll hang on to one of those top 3 spots. And Calgary is getting it together. I think they're starting to play a more structured team game. I think, again, when you bring in and you have a big turnover as far as top-end talent is concerned, it does take time.
Takes sometimes it takes a year.
Right. Yeah, it takes time. And so we're now seeing Huberdeau come out, and he's playing a lot better. Same with, the rest of this team. I think guys are starting to get back in the groove again. And I think, as well coached as they are, and they've got, the goaltending's been mediocre for them this year, and I think it's starting to come back around a little bit. So, Markstrom's starting to find his game back again. I think, this team continues to improve. There's no doubt in my mind they'll finish third in this division. So when you look at the wild card spot, though, I honestly would say that Colorado, to me, is more likely to just jump up and nab Minnesota's spot. But assuming Minnesota stays at number 3, and maybe, Winnipeg and Dallas don't, shit the bed. I honestly think it's probably going to be Seattle and Colorado, and I would honestly say if Kenny Holland doesn't make a move here soon, Edmonton's going to be on the outside looking in.
Okay. I'm going. I really like the Seattle team. They've been on a little bit of a dip right now. They do have 3 games in hand on Calgary. I really like the way that they're playing, and they're getting decent goaltending, and I think they could get even better goaltending. Like we said, it sometimes takes a year, even more, for guys to get comfortable with a new team, with a new city, and I guess you got to hope that that's kind of what you're seeing with their goaltending of it. I mean, Martin Jones comes in and he's been the savior for the Kraken. He's been fantastic, but Philip Grubauer, who has mightily struggled as a Kraken. I mean, even this year, 3-7-1. He has just not been great. He has shown some ability to play again. He's been much better. The last 5 games or so, he's been better. I guess he got yanked against the Edmonton Oilers, but in very short amount of time, 3 minutes and 55 seconds, he started and was pulled. But before that, even when he's losing some games, and he's playing fantastic. Like against Calgary, he made 41 saves with a .932 save percentage in a loss. A couple games before that, .923 save percentage, makes 36 saves in a loss against Carolina. His team is not playing as well in front of him, as they're not putting up the same amount of goal support as they have been for Martin Jones, who's been getting a lot of goal support. And really, I mean, neither Jones or Grubauer playing that great in terms of that save percentage. I mean, .888 versus an .881. You look at that and you go, okay, does this team have, can they stay in the playoff race with sub 8.9 save percentage? I don't know, but I really like them. I want to say that Seattle is the Vegas of their first year, and that Seattle can kind of climb. I look at that and I go, I don't think that Seattle has what it takes to sit here all year. In 35 more games from now, at the 70-game mark, do I think that they can have this same goal differential with an .888 save percentage? I don't think so. So either the goaltending's got to vastly improve, or this team, had a really nice first half, and they're just not there yet. That's probably the case. I think the Oilers get in. I think the Avs get in. I think the Flames get in. And whatever that order ends up being, likely Calgary is that third spot in the Pacific, and Edmonton finds its way into the wild card. And they get to either play Vegas or Dallas in the first round, which will be a hoot. And then I think probably in the end, Colorado figures themselves out, and they find their way into one of those top 3 spots in the division. Not the top spot, but duking it out with Minnesota. And I think Colorado gets into. I just don't think Seattle has what it takes to sit here all year long. I see them kind of LA. Do you remember last year LA they were pretty far ahead, and then they really started to kind of crumble towards the end, and they just didn't have the staying power. Now, they made the playoffs. They did end up making the playoffs, but I think that Seattle just didn't get far enough ahead to start, and I just don't think they have the horses or the goaltending to really get them through this next stage, where the next 35 games are much harder than the first 35 games.
Sure.
And that's where I don't think they have the staying power.
Well, I will say, we talked about depth, right, with a lot of these teams where Colorado could use a little bit more, Edmonton could use it, right? I don't know specifically what, the waiver claim was for all those other 2 teams, but Seattle goes out and they claim a guy named Ilya Tolvanen, a former first rounder out of Nashville, who I don't know why they put him on waivers, but they did. And so he gets snagged up by Seattle, and he's got a goal through his first game. And here's a guy who was projected to be a top 6 forward for Nashville at some point. And so who knows, maybe he finds his way again back in Seattle, and that could be just another added 1-2 punch, So again, you have a guy in your third line who adds, again, more depth scoring that other teams could really use. And so Again, I know we talked about St. Louis, right, in this West. We've already kind of, I don't want to say we put a nail in their coffin, but, we might as well start burying them. And so you look at a team like Seattle, to me, who would love to make a little bit of noise, right, for their fan base and get in the playoffs. And if you could go out and snag a Ryan O'Reilly or a Tarasenko and bring in one of those guys, you know what that would mean for this franchise? And I would say without a doubt they would instantly be, a playoff contender in my mind to get in if they could manage to snag one of those two guys.
Yeah, if they're as good as they were even last year. Ryan O'Reilly this year has been quite bad. I don't know how much he helps you, honestly, at this point. He just has been terrible. But maybe that fresh look on things would help him.
Yeah, I mean, and I will say, too, considering, what they have down the middle right now beyond Matty Beniers, I don't know if, Ryan O'Reilly is any worse than what they've got. So I think, getting that veteran guy in there who has won and knows how to win would be nothing but a boost for a lot of these younger guys. And then, of course, Tarasenko's got a no-trade clause, so he kind of controls a little bit of where he's going to go. So I don't think maybe Seattle's on his radar, but you never know, right? For the right price, maybe, who knows, right?
And if he's the only team, if that's the team that's after him and they're the only ones that want him.
Right, and maybe they're already talking to his agent about a possible extension, right? So maybe he's looking at it like, okay, cool, well, I can get a little bit more money here too. Sure.
Yeah. That Seattle team is. I hope that they're here. Like, I think at very least they're in the mix for a long time. I don't know that I don't think they're going to trade their first round pick, nor should they. They've got 3 second round picks. I could see them using one of those. Like, if they're in a position to make the playoffs, they're within 2 points of the playoffs at the deadline, you got to use one of those second round picks to bring someone in. Just to say, man, you guys have overachieved. Let's give you some help, and let's see if we can do this. We believe in you guys, right. And you see where your team can go. Especially since you have your top 2 centers, theoretically, for your franchise, and Shane Wright and Matty Beniers, and so now you sit there and you root for Shane Wright in the World Juniors playing today in the quarterfinals, and you hope that you wish the best for the rest of your team, because you don't need to be in the mix for a lottery pick anymore. You've got your top 2 guys. Now you want to see this team take steps, become a desirable place to win, and I think you'll really see some cool things happen. I mean, I know from what I understand, Seattle is already like a top 8 producer in terms of revenue in the league. Like, their market is just blowing up. So they're going to be a team that people want to go to. The league's going to push, and they're only getting started. We have not talked much about the Central Division. It feels more established than the Pacific. I mean, so does the top of the Pacific. We're not worried about Vegas. Fortunately for them, we're not really talking about them, and that's they're not in much of a race, even though they're only 4 points up. But they seem to have stabilized a little bit here, and they look good. Same with Dallas. I mean, I don't think anyone expects the Dallas Stars to fall from where they are. They've played such a good team game, which, by the way, I believe Joe Pavelski has signed an extension with the Dallas Stars for another year. So he will, not that we ever thought he was on the trade block, but he does sign a 1-year, $3.5 million deal.
Ooh, talk about team friendly. Oh,
yeah,
boy.
Yeah, they were like, hey, we had to pay Rupe Hintz, and so we need you to take a little less. You have lots of money, right? Yeah, all right.
No doubt about that.
I mean, you'll stay to. I mean, plus there is an inherent risk every year that a 38-year-old to a 39-year-old to a 40-year-old, every year somewhere you're going to fall off.
Yeah, but let's just be clear about this though.
For Pavelski.
Pavelski's also got 2 performance bonuses in there. He gets $1 million if he plays 10 games, and another $1 million if he plays 20. So he's clearly going to get those, barring a catastrophic injury to a season. But the nice thing about bonuses is you can roll those into the next year for the cap hit. So I think that's probably what they're doing. So when the cap goes up after next year, they can just write that off as no big deal.
All right, good to know. Well, Justin, I need to take off. So we will. Yeah, I know, a little bit shorter of a show. Why don't you give me your final thoughts on just the Western Conference playoff race?
Well, my final thoughts. We could probably talk about Arizona again, but you and I did enough about that. My final thoughts is just I'm hoping Winnipeg continues to play good hockey because after a lot of people writing them off as being they're going to miss the playoffs after last year. There's no way they're getting back in with this Colorado team, Minnesota and Dallas and all these other up and comers. I think it's great to see Winnipeg back in it because again my boy Connor Hollebuck is looking phenomenal. So, continued success for them and just a good 2023.
Yeah, I think that Winnipeg is, even though they've only been 5-5 in their last 10, which, it leading up to Christmas is kind of a weird time. This is where you gotta make your money right here. In this stretch, January tends to be that month where you can really separate yourself. For my money, I think this might be the hardest month of the season because it's dead in the middle. That you've played a lot of hockey. You also have a ton of hockey left to go. Mentally taxing. You're in that grind right now. It's cold as balls in some of these cities, especially Winnipeg, Edmonton. So there's just not that it's nice outside still. And I think this is the hardest month. Okay. But it's the month where you can really separate yourself because some teams go on a big slump in this month, and I think this is the month where if Winnipeg's going to really cement themselves in this division, keep that second spot here. They're without a lot of players. Wheeler, Ehlers, Schmidt, Appleton, Stanley, and lots of guys on IR, but all of them expected back here within the next couple weeks. So. Connor Hellebuck having another Vezina Trophy winning season. You think he steals it?
No, I think he's right. He's in that conversation, but I don't think he's stolen it quite yet. There's other guys like Ilya Sorokin and Linus Ullmark who are going to be at the top of that conversation. But
Linus Ullmark has been freaking fantastic. Oh my goodness! But I'm looking at it and I'm going, well, that's the team in front of him, right? But a .938 save percentage, my goodness, hard to argue with that. So that's 3% higher than the average right now.
And I will also add to, speaking of goaltending, I'm hoping Jordan Binnington continues to shit the bed because I want to see St. Louis drop. I want to see what happens with these two big names we talked about, O'Reilly and Tarasenko, and I love those big players getting moved. So excited for that.
I think that'll be our next show. I think we got to talk some big moves, the biggest moves that we think are coming up, because that's we're right in that conversation where we know some of these teams are out and we've talked about them, but now it's time to what trades are going to happen. I think that's probably our next
top
spot.
10?
But maybe before we do that, just to tease a little bit. I mean, we are headed in after this week. We'll basically be at the halfway mark of the regular season. So you know what that means. Mm-hmm. We've got our midseason awards coming up.
Oh yeah.
I think I'm okay with doing them at some teams are at game 40. That's fine. We'll do a midseason award, but I think we should probably do that midseason award show and then we'll dive into some trade talk after that.
I love it.
All right. Well, find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk, and Justin, have a great rest of your day. And to our listeners, Happy New Year, and look forward to our mid-season awards coming up soon. See you guys. too. Bringing in a Calle Yarncroke, guys who have someone who has played his entire career as someone who can play both sides of the puck. David Kampf has. I talked about it last year. I think we did a mid-season award show, and I said, David Kampf. Look at him for the Selke, because he was taking I think 85% of his faceoffs were in the defensive zone. I mean, the guy is just a juggernaut defensively, killing every penalty. He's been great for the Leafs, and I think has really grown into that role for Sheldon Keefe. They finally, I think, are in a place where they're willing to do what it takes. They're blocking shots. They're committed to the defensive side, and I think you've seen that with. Hey, there has been a decline in the amount of goals that this team is scoring, but it's on purpose. And they're saying, yeah, we're purposely trying much harder to keep the puck out of our net than we have in the past. And it's certainly showing. And I think you're now seeing, if this were any other team, if this were the Boston Bruins are doing this just on an even better scale. If this were the New Jersey Devils, if this were the Winnipeg Jets, just you're any team, you'd go, wow, this team is incredible defensively, and they're going to win in the first round. I think, and it's just because the history, the Leafs haven't been able to get out of the first round, yada yada. I think everything's poised for them to win. That doesn't mean they're going to win, but I think they should be heavily favored to win. In this first round matchup, it's shown up in the games that they've played against Tampa recently. The Leafs have just been the better team, and that's without Morgan Riley. That's without. I mean, we think Jake Muzzin will be out the rest of the year anyways, but so kind of a moot point. But they did it without T.J. Brody in the first game. I mean, this team is committed defensively, and it's showing. And I think come playoff time, that's where it's going to go. Oh, this is a different team. This is a different team than what we've seen because of that. And, hopefully they can keep playing that way all year. It is only 30 games.
Yeah, and let me ask you, too. I mean, looking at the numbers, do you think this team, outside of, obviously, we know the top four scorers on this Ford group, do you think outside of those four guys, they have enough scoring, depth-wise on their third and fourth line to compete?
Well, I mean, I do think they'll make some acquisition here in the next 3 months. I think you'll see them bring someone in. They do have a lot of cap space accruing right now with all the injuries that they've had. So in the end, that's a benefit. They'll have the $5 million that Jake Muzzin is allotted for. They'll be able to go out and acquire a scorer, and I think you'll see that. I also recently there has been some more offense coming from those bottom two lines, and some of it, I think you're going, well, those bottom lines are a lot of times playing with their defenseman back there is what? It's been Victor Mete, Jordy Ben. It's been these guys who are really barely NHL defensemen, or if they're 5'6" defensemen, and they're not getting the time with these better guys. Rasmus Sandin, of course, goes down too for the Leafs. So I mean, that's not helping. But you've got Engvall's been scoring a little bit more recently. Yarncroke, who again, remember, this is a new team. Yarncroke started to score a little bit more, and I think you're going to see those bottom six lines kind of find the back of the net here moving forward. But their top two lines are so good. And Bunting has been much better the last 15 games than he was in the first 19. And I think you're seeing the kind of player that you want Bunting to be. Kerfoot's been a little bit better. So I think some of this was that commitment to defense, and that maybe it was a little bit harder to also score and be really committed defensively. And now they're really starting to reap the benefits of playing that way. And guys are starting to score a little bit more. So I think by
the answer.
What's that?
Said Dryden Hunt is the answer.
Yes, of course, yes. Had to get rid of Dennis Morgan. Connor Timmins has looked good. Like there's all sorts of things to like about this team, and it's the downside or the upside of injury is you get a lot of opportunities for guys who wouldn't normally. So I think that for the playoffs, that is wonderful. Guys like Liljegren, I know Sandin's hurt, but he was given lots of opportunities and has played well. There are guys who deserved a chance and are getting it, and they're shining. Giordano's been as good as you can ever ask for a 40-year-old defenseman to be as a number one defenseman for a team for a while. I like a lot of what this team has done, and I think that you have to expect they're going to go out and they're going to spend. I mean, there's no reason to not at least trade something to be able to bring in a scorer. And there's going to be plenty of free agents on some of these teams that are way out of the playoffs, and we'll find out what they ultimately do. But every team brings in someone at the deadline, right? Like that just is going to happen. Let's see. Do any other as far as the playoff race? Boston finishing number one. I think we're both there. I don't think anyone's going to catch them, especially if they never lose at home ice in regulation. 18-0-2. My goodness. As far as that, I guess there is a race between Tampa, Detroit, Buffalo, right? Like even if they don't end up catching those wild card teams, there still is that 3-4 in the division. But I don't think either of us see Tampa falling that far. Yeah.
No. I think Tampa ultimately will finish at number 3. It's just a question mark of whether or not Detroit, Buffalo, or Florida even can push for one of those wild card spots. I think that's the biggest question mark. And honestly, if I had to choose out of the 3, I would probably take Buffalo just because I like offensively their ability to score so much. I think they're just entertaining, and again, they could come in and shock a few teams here down the stretch. Yep,
I agree. They will definitely, at very least, be a spoiler. The playoff race is really the Metropolitan Division. I think the Atlantic is probably pretty set, which is sort of unfortunate. Like you were hoping for a little bit of a race. Now Detroit does have those games in hand. We'll see if they can win some of those. By the way, Detroit's game was postponed today. It was supposed to be played in Ottawa, and they have postponed it because of inclement weather. So I don't know when that actually happened, but I just saw the notification for it. So they will not be playing that game, which maybe is fortunate since they lost 6-3 just a week ago to the Ottawa Senators. So maybe they just need to push that game down the road a little bit. But they'll start their Christmas early. So I'm sure no one on the Red Wings or the Senators minds having that game canceled and kick it down the can a little bit, or down the road. Any final thoughts on the playoff races in the Eastern Conference before we get out of here?
I can't wait to see if, speaking of the Eastern Conference playoff race, and Ottawa's clearly out of it, I just can't wait to see if they start jettisoning pieces here pretty soon. So that'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I don't think they're going to ditch Alex DeBrincat. I think they traded too much to get him, and I mean, he's a point per game player right now. I know he's not looking like he's going to put up 40. He's looking like he's going to put up 20, 25 goals, but I think he'll find that. Sometimes it just takes guys a long time to get used to a new team, especially when they've been in one place their whole career. And it's not as if if Alex DeBrincat right now had 18 goals instead of 10, I doubt that Ottawa is in much of a different position. Because probably you got to think, well, someone else is sometimes scoring that goal instead. Maybe he has fewer assists, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't think that maybe it gives Ottawa an extra win. But that's still, if Ottawa has an extra win, they maybe are ahead of Montreal instead. So I don't think that it makes a huge difference. He's not the reason they're losing. But yeah, it will be fun. I think Ottawa, I think Philadelphia, there's a lot of interest there. It would be fun to see Van Riemsdyk go somewhere, assuming that you can ditch his contract in a couple places to get that number down. I think Tarasenko, I think that this is probably the time for him to get dealt. And he wanted to get dealt a couple years ago, or even just last year, he wanted to get dealt, and it never happened. Things went well in St. Louis. Now things aren't going so well. We'll talk a little bit more about that in our Western Conference playoff race show, but it'll be, I think that Tarasenko is probably a hot trade chip for St. Louis, especially the amount of teams that could really use a goal scorer. I got to imagine that there's a team out there who would be willing to give up at least a second-round pick for Tarasenko, if not a first-round pick, to be able to get a guy who, come playoff time, has been pretty good. So,
yep, I'm looking at you, Rangers.
Stanley Cup. Yeah, the Rangers. I mean, I think we're all looking at Patty Kane, and then maybe Tarasenko's that like the consolation prize.
Yeah, but how long do you wait on Patrick Kane? Right? I mean, that's the question mark.
Well, you're gonna probably have to wait until when's the trade deadline?
March. Gosh.
It is March the 3rd.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, and then you're also, now all of a sudden Bo Horvat's on that radar. I am not positive that he's going to get dealt. I know all the stuff came out about him, he declined a contract offer, but that's stupid. Do you know how many times contract offers get turned down and then they sign something different? Who cares if one offer was turned down? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, there's been a lot of, there's been a lot of times where guys, don't re-sign all year, and then you get like 2 days before the free agency period opens and they re-sign. So.
I.e. Malkin.
Yep, absolutely.
But I also think Vancouver's got a lot of, I think they'll have to they'll deal Besser first before they even think about dealing Bo Horvat. I mean, he only has 22 goals in 32 games, so.
Yeah, only.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of guys who could be available at the deadline, and especially scorers. Like, there's not much in terms of the defensive side. I'm not super excited about what's out there for that. Gurianov in Columbus is out there, and
Tyler Myers
and Gossip. Yeah, there's some okay names. I mean, of course, Jacob Chikrin, but that's a much bigger deal, and I'm not sure what playoff team is going to give up as much as Arizona wants for him during the season. I mean, off season, he's going to go somewhere. I don't know he gets dealt during the season. I'm not sure. Not sure that happens. Maybe someone gets desperate. And I'm sure that's what Arizona's waiting for. Arizona's waiting for a playoff team or a team that's on the bubble to get desperate enough to give them that extra piece that they're hoping that extra piece turns into a player that plays for them, right? So it's fair. I'm just not sure that there's the teams that might do it. I'm not sure they're in a position to do it right now. That would be my hang up on that deal, but we will find out. Well, that is our show. You can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk, and on our next show we'll do the Western Conference playoff race. But until then, if you have snow coming or it's already there, stay warm. Don't have a heart attack shoveling. Don't do that. That's
right.
Bad. We only have so many listeners. We can't afford to lose you. We'll just say that. No, even if we had 1 million listeners, which we don't, just a hair below that, but we don't want to lose any of you. And Justin, I hope you have a Merry Christmas. And Merry Christmas to all those out there, or whatever it is that you celebrate on the 25th of December. Yeah, hope you have a Merry Christmas, Justin.
Yeah, you too, Mark.
What'd you get me?
Merry Christmas. What did I get you? A day without having to listen to my awful voice anymore.
Oh, well, that's like an anti-gift.
Oh, okay.
Terrible. All right, well, that's us. We'll talk to you guys soon.